with regularly scheduled content. I wasn't entirely fond of having to move from video game and tabletop content to make a commentary on some backward-ass changes the country is requiring from here on out. But anyway, I'm quite happy to announce that we're pivoting back to Cyberpunk for the time being. With video games being put on the back burner, I have a few things planned, including looking at the Fourth Corporate War and of course finishing out the playlist on Cyberpunk roles, which we're continuing today with the Medtech. Funny story about that though. I remember that I had footage recorded explaining the Medtech, the media, and the exec classes, so I went on a hunt for it. Well, turns out that when I did a bunch of upgrading to both my PC and my wife's PC, I didn't back up any of the recorded footage to a flash drive or the cloud. So when I upgraded my SSD and wiped the old one to give to my wife, I lost all that footage. I mean, it's not much of a loss. To be honest, I needed to start from scratch and she needed the old SSD for her netbook anyway, and that blunder gives me the chance to readjust for how I create content in this universe, specifically the chunk of this series pertaining to classes. Keeping that in mind, I've elected to start delving into each class individually instead of explaining 3 classes at once. I'm hoping to make things a little more digestible for you, the viewer, as well as trying to decrease the workload for myself with this system. But I've droned on long enough, so let's go ahead and take a look at the Medtech. When looking at my previous video, I took note of comparisons I made to other Dungeons & Dragons classes. My initial hope was for this to be able to kind of create a bridge between the two games to make whatever transition you may be making a little easier. This will be the last video in which I tried to compare a Cyberpunk class to a Dungeons & Dragons class because they tend to get a little fuzzy past this point. But the best class that I could compare the Medtech to would probably be the Cleric, and that's because they're both in charge of managing the party's HP. I mean, in Cyberpunk, nothing's going to beat good old R&R, but you at least can make use of items and tools to make sure that your party's HP is top-notch. Breaking down this role gave me a little bit of trouble, and here's why. For starters, you get an extra skill called Medical Tech, which is Medtech specific, and there's technically 3 of them to kind of keep track of. The Medical Tech skill is only mentioned in a sidebar on page 149. Now, Medical Tech is a combination of 2 of 3 subcategories of Medtech called Pharmaceutical and Cryo System Operations. The third, Surgery, has no play on the Medical Tech skill. Actually, it's its own skill entirely. As a side note for character creation, the Medical Tech skill is technically classified as a tech skill. Anyway, every time you use improvement points to buy another level in medicine, you put a point in either Pharmaceuticals, Cryosystem Operations, or Surgery. I thought initially that you picked only one field because in the text for each of the subcategories you get access to yet another version of the Medical Tech skill. So, let me break this down a little further, then we'll look into what you get when you put points into each of the categories. To start, when a player creates a Medtech, instead of just having the medical skill listed, I would have the player write down the Medical Tech skill along with the Medical Tech Pharmaceutical, the Medical Tech Cryosystems Operations skill, and Surgery, which isn't necessarily listed as a tech skill, both to keep track of the points put into both of the special medical tech fields, and in the case there's a situation that requires specification. I might be doing too much, but there's 2 reasons. Firstly, if you begin to read down into the pharmaceutical subsection on page 149, you'll see a statement, and again on page 150 under the Cryosystems Operations subsection. It goes, for every point you allocate into Medical Tech Pharmaceuticals / Cryosystems Operations, you gain 1 point in the Medical Tech skill up to a maximum of 10. The Medical Tech skill is the skill used to operate, understand, and repair medical technology. Now both the Pharmaceutical subskill and the Cryosystems Operations skills max out at 5 points. Why? Because of the second reason. On page 149 there's a side pocket of text. It says that your medical tech skill equals your points in pharmaceuticals plus your points in cryosystems operations. So let's say that I am a level 7 medtech with 3 points in cryosystems operations and 4 points in pharmaceuticals. For some reason or another, I neglected surgery even though it can be useful, which we'll look at later on. My total points for the medical tech skill would be 7. Again, I have the player keep medical tech pharmaceuticals, and medical tech cryosystems operations and surgery wrote down as separate skills in order to keep track of the math. To simplify, cryosystems plus pharmaceuticals equals medical tech skill. Now, what do you get from each of these subcategories? We'll start with pharmaceuticals. If you look at the chart on page 150, you'll see 5 different items. Every time you put a point into pharmaceuticals, you choose one of these items. Congratulations! You can now produce the item you chose. Now, your medtech can make a number of doses equal to their medical tech skill in an hour. So let's say you're a medtech with a medical skill tech of 7, you can make 7 doses of speed heal in an hour given that you roll higher than a DV13, and it's only going to cost you 200 eddies. Now, whether or not you roll per dose is up to the GM. Personally, I don't do that. I have it run on a pass-fail basis. If they pass the check, well cool, they have 7 doses. If not, they better either pony up and try again or just go without it. Administering a dose of your medication, assumedly during combat, will cost you an action. In and out of combat, if a character is unwilling to accept the treatment, you may make a melee attack with your air high bow. But instead of dealing damage, it counts as administering the medication. So you won't do damage calculation, you'll do whatever the effect of the medication is. Something I had to change for narrative purposes pertaining to my campaign, a medtech cannot synthesize street drugs. I figure if the medtech had enough chemistry training to synthesize medicine, the medtech would have enough chemistry training to synthesize street drugs, especially in Night City. Trauma Team sure as shit does not pay enough to put up with the bullshit, so might as well create and sell drugs on the side. Now, to compensate for the change, I made the DV13 a DV15, and I made the material cost double. I also made the yield equal to half the medical tech level rounded down. For people you may recruit to help produce product, I limited the yield doses to 2 per recruit. See, in my campaign, the medtech was helping the solo and the fixer revive the Irish mob presence in Night City. And what other way is there to win the favor of the city folk than intoxicating them? Anyway, moving on to cryosystem operations. This one functions roughly the same, with a chart and a limit of 5 points allocated to the subcategory. The difference is that with the chart you go in sequential order, so with 1 point you gain access to a cryo pump. It's a bag that has a mini cryo freeze pump attached to it, which can hold a person in stasis up to a week while you perform whatever surgery or medical procedure to pull the person inside out of the mortally wounded state. The person does not roll death saves while in stasis. It starts with a single charge. At level 2, you gain access to a cryo tank at any hospital or government facility, which does what a cryo pump does, but it's more than just a quick fix piece of tech. The person can be held in stasis indefinitely, and the healing rate doubles while suspended in stasis. The person counts as unconscious as well. At level 3, you get a cryo tank installed in a room of your choosing, presumably where you live, or if you're using the headquarters downloadable PDF, you can house it there. At level 4, you get 2 more cryo tanks installed in that very same room. Your cryo pump gains 2 more charges and can carry 2 people. At level 5, you gain 3 more cryo tanks for a total of 6 tanks. Your cryo pump can hold 3 people and gets 3 more charges for a maximum of 6 charges. I know this was a rather bare bones explanation of cryosystems operation, but this set of rules is relatively straightforward. I've included screenshots of the full rules for both the cryo pump and the cryo tank for you to pause and look at as well. That being said, we're going to go ahead and move on to surgery, as well as some of the outside uses of the medical tech skill, and then we'll wrap it up. So, in contrast to the last two subcategories of medicine, whenever you allocate a point to surgery, you instead get 2 points in the surgery skill for a maximum of 10. Surgery is the tech skill that allows you to treat the most severely critical wounded states, as well as harvesting and implanting cyberware. So, both harvesting and installing cyberware runs off of the same chart on page 226. Pay special attention to the install category on all of your cyberware charts on page 111. That will help determine the surgery DV that you use on page 226. For example, cyberware with the mall install level require a Medtech to beat a DV 13 versus cyberware with a hospital DV requiring a Medtech to beat a DV 17 with a surgery roll. As a side note, I also include a D6 of humanity loss whenever harvesting cyberware. It's basically desecration of a corpse, and if the person is alive, it's also a form of torture. Now, if you fail either the harvesting of the cyberware or the installation, the cyberware is broken and needs to be taken to a tech to be repaired before reuse. Body sculpting is a simpler process. It's a DV 15 for standard body sculpting with 100 eddy cost, and exotic body sculpting with a DV 17 and a 500 eddy cost. This next bit's a little chunky, but it is kind of necessary to explain therapy. As you build your character and install new cyberware, you'll notice the cost to your humanity. We'll cover this a bit more when we finally move to a character creation video, but we'll briefly touch on humanity and the empathy stat here, as once again it pertains to the next section. If you look at your character sheet, you'll notice the EMP stat. That's empathy. That stat is recorded as a single number, 0 through 9, and it works in conjunction with another stat called humanity, which is recorded in the tens. So a character with a 6 in empathy has 60 points of humanity, which is reduced each time you install a piece of cyberware. Once you start installing cyberware, your humanity stat will never be the maximum, so it'll never return to that full 60 points unless you start removing cyberware. Same with your empathy stat, and the closer you get to 0, the closer you get to cyberpsychosis. Very, very briefly, when a character goes cyberpsycho, the GM takes control of the player's character and plays the worst negative traits of the character. Also very briefly, humanity loss is treated as an identity disorder, which if you guys want me to, I could discuss how humanity loss is treated as an identity disorder in a separate video. Just let me know in the comment section below. Anyway, a Medtech can help curb the effects of cyberpsychosis and restore humanity points by means of therapy. The question may arise, well, what about immunoblockers like in edge runners? Well, yes, there is a rule set for immunoblockers. It isn't found in the core rules, and instead is found in the Edge Runner's mission kit, which I'll also be covering probably in a later, shorter video. For now, we're going to focus on therapy. So, a medtech will roll a medical tech skill and compare their result to the chart on page 230. That chart includes therapy for battling addiction, standard humanity loss, and extreme humanity loss. Starting with a failed check, the entire week was an absolute waste and any materials used are chalked up to a loss. Keep in the back of your mind that the materials for these therapies are completely controlled by Biotechnica. The medtech in my game made an absolute enemy of Biotechnica, and should he have needed to perform a therapy, he would have found his license to buy therapy-related goods revoked. Now back to the chart on page 230. If you look under the column that says description, you'll find the materials you'll need to purchase there. For example, if you look at the standard humanity loss section, it says 1 week of intensive psychotherapy combining stress and anger management counseling, hypnosis, and minor direct brain reprogramming aided by pharmaceuticals in a safe environment in which may be induced by therapeutic brain dance. If nobody has a brain dance player, you would have to buy one of those too. As for the actual performance of the therapy, that falls on the Medtech. Looking at the same option, standard humanity loss, you'll see that the Medtech needs to roll higher than a 15 to succeed the therapy check. If your Medtech is higher than a level 5, meeting this requirement isn't too problematic. However, if you're just starting out, don't even try it. I do believe I skipped the line in the script that tells you, hey, the stuff that counts as materials would be the pharmaceuticals and the brain dance. And of course, there are other things you can do to spice up how your medtech functions, like looking up the specific drugs used for sedation and such, but that's all in how deep you're willing to dive into your character. For now, I think I've broke this character down as far as I'm willing to go. Should I need to break things down a little further, I will create a follow-up video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or this video helped you in any way, shape, or form, please perform the YouTube Holy Trinity and maybe leave a comment down below. I'll see you guys later.